and I'm gonna scare the hell out of you.
Have you ever looked at the Esrb's rating system for video games? It's a pretty basic system. E and E10 games are suitable for kids, T for teen is the PG-13 equivalent for minor violence, M is the gaming equivalent of an R rating where it's got blood, gore, sex, and swearing, i.e. don't buy this for your little kids and then bitch about the content, you dumbasses! Fuckhead! And then there's AO for adults only. The existence of the AO rating always mystified me because I'd never seen a game with the rating, and it turns out there's a good reason for that. If a game gets the AO rating, most stores and several entire countries outright refuse to carry it. By my research, only about 30 games have ever gotten an AO rating, and almost all of them for being porn games, or in San Andreas' case for it being hacked into a porn game. Only 3 games have received the AO rating for violence alone: the 2015 game Hatred, which in my opinion was more due to controversy than content, Thrill Kill, a game that was never officially released, and the 2008 game Manhunt 2. Getting banned on most of the Earth forced the developer Rockstar to censor Manhunt 2 down to an M rating for a wide release, but about a year later the uncut version was released on PC, because what use has Steam ever had for standards? Oh shit, Steam actually doesn't carry the sequel anymore. Loads of games have more exaggerated over-the-top gore, but the Manhunt games were focused on showcasing realistic murders with household items to the point they even skeeved out their development teams. Twitch to this day explicitly bans any streaming of Manhunt 2, but you can easily find the uncut version's footage on YouTube, because what use has YouTube ever had for standards? Why in the hell an unrelenting gore fest that broke the Esrb was released onto the notoriously family-friendly Wii is a mystery to me, but oh well, here we are with Manhunt 2. The first Manhunt game follows a death row inmate James Earl Cash, whose execution is faked by a snuff film ring so they can force him to fight street gangs for survival. In Manhunt 2, Mr. Cash has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on. You play as Danny Lamb, a mental patient with amnesia who escapes an asylum with his buddy Leo and sets out to rediscover his forgotten past. The two are hunted by a secret conspiracy called The Project, forcing Danny to violently murder a seemingly endless succession of agents that are out to kill him. Danny is a very timid man, perpetually overwhelmed by everything around him with severe memory problems and recurring blackouts, and Leo is super violent, never lifts a finger to help you, spontaneously appears and disappears constantly, doesn't show up in gameplay outside of a voice in your head encouraging you to kill, never interacts with anybody else, and seems to know every last impossibly intimate detail about Danny's life. So you've probably already figured out that Leo doesn't exist and Danny is split personality, because I sure as hell figured it out before the game's tutorial was over! Maybe I'm wrong. The instruction booklet says that they're two different people, though it's less a manual and instead a series of lore-giving internal memos and patient reports from the asylum, and it doesn't list any actual personal info on Leo. Instead, it talks about predator and prey groups and an apparatus that enhances people's tracking instincts. So you've probably already figured out that the project is using brain manipulation tech to turn people into assassins, another twist that's meant to stay secret until the end game.
This right here, kids, is why you don't read.
Adding to the spoiler pile, the manual tells you that Danny is a bioweapon engineer. I bet he totally wasn't in on the project. Manhunt 2 is, kind of, a stealth game. Given that the game aims for realism and Danny is a nerd with no fighting experience, the combat is stiff and awkward and outright suicidal if you don't have a good weapon equipped. You're instead meant to stick to the blacked out sections of the map where people can't see you, avoid making noise unless you're actively drawing out enemies, and mainly take out your foes with executions where you ambush and kill them with lenient quicktime events. And as you may have noticed, the executions are downright maddening to watch as the camera shakes, the contrast is cranked up to 100, and you can never tell what in the hell is going on. The game basically cuts to black and edits the bad guy to death. To avoid the dreaded AO rating, Rockstar opted to take the single laziest route possible, censoring the game, and just put a whole ton of filters over the executions to make the action completely incomprehensible. But on the flip side, because they were so lazy, it's apparently really easy to hack the game to remove the filters and decensor everything. And this did not stir up controversy despite the infamous hot coffee level having the exact same background, because the Kool-Aid Man is red. And the blacked out executions aren't even the worst of the editing. Every time the game needs to cut to something else, this happens.
I'll scout ahead, Danny, and I'll get us out of here.
every single cut, that burst of static and gibberish pops up. Atmosphere in a video game is totally subjective, and these cuts and the wobbly camera might enhance the creepy, unsettling mood for some people, but to me they're just annoying as balls and make the game feel too try-hard. I understand that horror games tend to gimp the controls on purpose so that you're more helpless, but everything about the gameplay here feels extremely clunky. The camera is terrible. It points straight behind you, and aside from kinda leaning to the side by tilting the nunchuck, you can't aim it. If you want to look around you, which is kind of important in a stealth game where you need to map out enemies and plan out your moves, then you need to come to a stop and slowly turn in place to look around you, and you need to come to a dead stop because otherwise the game will send you walking in circles, exiting cover, and getting killed. You perform executions by walking behind an enemy that hasn't spotted you, holding A, and then performing the remote swings indicated in the corner, and not a single step of that process goes smoothly. Your stealth walk is almost the exact same speed as enemies' movement speed, and enemies will often whirl around with zero warning, meaning you can't sneak up on people. You have to swing the remote as soon as the prompt appears, because that prompt in the corner can vanish so that you swing at the air and lose stealth. And for the love of crap, never leave a throwing weapon equipped, because if you so much as twitch the hand holding the Wii remote, it will throw said item, give away your position, and get you killed. Of course, the easy, i.e. correct, way to get through stealth encounters is to find one shady corner where you're invisible, knock on a wall to draw out any guard that's in the room, and after he stands a foot away staring right at you for a few seconds, he'll give up, turn around, and you can execute him on the spot. Then repeat until the entire room's been killed. This is an extremely easy method for clearing out most stealth sections for practically zero effort, especially since the enemy AI is dumb as rocks. Only one enemy will ever come over to investigate a noise, you're pretty much flat-ass undetectable in the shadows, spotting a dead body only barely weirds out the AI and barely seems to change their patterns, the stealth devolves into a complete joke. Just watch out for when making a noise arbitrarily sends all the nearby guards into kill crazy mode and they swarm and kill you. I never figured out what causes that. Maybe you can't make noise if an enemy is too close or something. Combat consists of shaking the remote and the nunchuck to throw punches with awkward nobody throws a punch this way, massive pauses between hits, and the items are really strangely balanced. If you go into any fight bare-handed or with one of the single-use execution weapons, you will lose, but once you get a melee weapon, you not only get infinite executions, but you pretty much don't need to worry about combat anymore. You can easily take two guys at once as long as neither of them have guns, and I know this probably changes if you play the insane difficulty, but the game is loaded with health pickups to where you'll go into a lot of fights at full health. Plus, if you die, you respawn at typically generous checkpoints at full health. I seriously don't get why you lose all your weapons in between levels, though. They don't even try to justify why the guy being hunted by assassins around every corner just abruptly drops all his equipment and goes into every new area barehanded.
I don't need this weapon no more! Man, I better find me a weapon!
Every horror game inevitably entails the question of whether or not the game is scary, and horror is totally subjective. I was really scared of the original Nightmare on Elm Street, but my mom just kept laughing at how over-the-top alcoholic mom was drinking in every scene. But for me, Manhunt 2 just wasn't scary at all. It should be on paper. You're a nerd trapped in oppressive environments being hunted by an endless series of psycho killers who will find and kill you if you breathe wrong, and you're forced to do horrible things to survive. But the combat and stealth are easily exploited and balanced to where you're often the one in charge of every situation, with the game's atmosphere often being the only thing keeping really dirt simple gameplay halfway compelling, and yet things just kept taking me out of the game. The annoying controls, irritating fetch quests in the second level, trial and error bits of levels where enemies will detect you out of nowhere. I keep getting too annoyed by the game to be scared by it. But hands down, the biggest problem hampering the horror for me is the storyline, because the game's plot is, and I think I'm being generous here, stupid. So Danny and Leo escape from an asylum, and Danny heads to his old house because he's left a drug there that does something. If you want to know what the hell's going on, you have to go to the game's marketing page for lore to find out that Danny invented a magic serum that undoes memory loss. Leo just keeps insisting to Danny that the project is sending hitmen after him and won't rest until they're dead, and right there is part of the problem. The first Manhunt had a relatively normal man and his family kidnapped by a guy so rich that he was above the law, forced to fight gangs and a corrupt police force. That's scary because it preys on a lot of relatable fears that a lot of people have. A government conspiracy of shadowy men in black after you for no adequately explained reason? Not so much. Besides, we don't learn jack about what the project actually does, and only have Leo's word for it that they're evil. Unless you went to the game's marketing page and read all the lore on the horrific experiments the project runs for ungodly flimsy objectives, like burning inmates alive to test a healing cream, or horribly mutilating a patient in surgeries with no painkillers to see if torture pisses people off. This whole conspiracy is really stupid the more I think about it. The second level is friggin' annoying. To break into the house, you have to find a crowbar that I swear just materialized out of nowhere, and because every object in the game vibrates like hell to look crazy, it's damn near invisible. Then you have to tediously search every floor of the house for random chests that blend in with the environment, and this gets really boring really fast. That all-important immersion has been shot full of more holes than Swiss cheese. Danny finds a matchbook from a local S&M bar and decides to investigate on the off chance that he learns something about his past, and get used to the plot taking random superfluous detours into sex bars, porno theaters, and sex shops and brothels as the game keeps embarrassing itself trying to show how edgy it is. For some reason, the project recruits subjects out of this bar and takes them to the back to strap them to chairs and kill them, and this contributes to science somehow.
You shouldn't have come here, Danny.
You know my name?
It's the project, Danny. They're everywhere.
What's going on? Leo said I should...
Leo? You've spoken to Leo?
Without Leo, I wouldn't even be here.
Okay.
Danny finds a scientist who tells him to go to a safe house at a theater. Funny how she talks about Leo but doesn't acknowledge his presence when he's right there. And naturally, going to the safe house necessitates going through a porno store. Wait! Danny finds a picture of an old friend and has a flashback to 6 years prior where the two were arguing about a boat. Yeah, this really is just as random and out of nowhere in context. If you somehow haven't figured out the split personality plot twist yet, this is the point where the game starts screaming it at you, between Danny having no idea how he got there, Mikey yelling that they've messed with your head, the bad guys calling Danny a rogue agent, enemies calling Leo by the wrong name, and a cutscene of Danny telling his family that he's signing up for an experiment, in which his wife worries that they'll make him a psycho. Because subtlety is for shit. Danny finds a picture of the same doctor lady that we met earlier, so he leaves to track her down again, which entails trekking through a porno theater showing a sex scene where the girl's underwear is clearly still on, and then another level going through a brothel the doctor's at for no clear reason, where you use the noise of people loudly having sex to cover yourself, as well as 3 guards that will keep detecting you out of nowhere and killing you. And when they find the doctor, she just dies out of nowhere anyway. Though I do have to laugh at the receptionist at the brothel who is 100% calm and casual, talking to Danny very obviously drenched in blood! Anyway, are you starting to notice a pattern here with the story? Besides the juvenile use of sex, every level is find thingy pointing you to a place, go to that place, following crappy breadcrumbs that never have any payoff, while Danny avoids figuring out the painfully obvious twist through plot contrivance, migraines, seizures, and blackouts. We are now halfway through the game, and nothing's friggin' happened yet.
You were right. We got him.
See, you just gotta trust me, Danny.
Danny has another out-of-nowhere flashback to him and Leo on some kind of assassination mission where they kill someone. You have no clue what's going on unless you read the instruction booklet and pieced together that this random document here is talking about all the flashback levels. And here we come to the elephant in the room that I've been dancing around this whole review. Judging by my research, the first Manhunt is a well enough liked game, but it received near universal criticism for basically ditching its stealth gameplay and becoming a shooter halfway through. But luckily, Rockstar learned their lesson with Manhunt 2. This one becomes a shooter a third of the way through. Your first exposure to the gun combat comes in level 5, where you eventually get a gun and use it to mow down a ton of evil project agents with any pretense of stealth, tension, or horror thrown completely out the window. And from this point on, almost every level revolves heavily around gun combat, with maybe a brief stealth segment beforehand. The problem is that the gun combat is terrible. The enemies are dumb as soup and basically stand in the open, with every encounter staged like a shooting gallery. Enemies can barely aim, so if you're even slightly behind cover, it will block most of the hits sent your way. If you get close enough to an enemy and point in the general direction of their head, the game will lock on for an automatic insta-kill headshot that lets you clear out armed foes with ease by just walking straight into them. The cursor flat out tells you if shots will hit, and the game drops a metric crap load of ammo and healing items. It's not until the last 2 levels that these shooting bits become remotely challenging, with enemies having high-powered rifles that kill you in a few hits. The upside is you can actually freely look around while the gun is drawn. The only problem is the Wii version's cursor tends to get stuck on the edges in the screen and get you frozen walking in circles.
Would someone please fix the remote cursor?
So our tense horror survival stealth game about a hapless dork desperately trying to elude a government conspiracy is now a spy thriller about a rogue agent gunning his way through leagues of agents out to get him, and the game will keep schizophrenically swapping between the two for the remainder of the game. This doesn't work. If you want to be a shooter, why are all the controls so shitty and stiff to accommodate a horror game engine? And why is the interface still so desperately screaming horror game at the top of its lungs? And if you want to be a horror game, why am I reenacting James Bond movies, effortlessly gunning down waves of faceless henchmen? Actually, it's more like an R-rated Jason Bourne, because if we were James Bond, we'd be doing something productive! We're just left with an action game that controls like ass and has no energy, pacing, sense of escalation, or stakes to it. Danny and Leo in the present flee from an ambush of soldiers, which entails some kind of neat unarmed stealth before reverting back to the shooting. And then Danny has another completely arbitrary flashback to him and Leo infiltrating a warehouse to burn their records. This level was kind of fun and well designed, but as if the plot wasn't jumping around enough yet, now we keep leaping into completely arbitrary flashbacks that make the story feel even more disjointed. And then, literally out of freaking nowhere, Danny and Leo just happen to run into the lead scientist of the project after wandering through the sewers. Yeah, they just stumble across Dr. Pickman. And brief side note, you have a horror game on a Nintendo console and you're really sticking with naming your villain Pickman? To be fair, we are 2/3 of the way through the game. Stuff should actually happen at some point. This level is annoying as balls. It starts with you needing to enter a room where enemies kill you literally the instant you walk inside, then some gunplay, then a really strange cutscene of Danny being brainwashed by flashing random images and words to him, and then Danny gets caught because the doctor has built failsafe phrases that will instantly paralyze Danny or completely erase his memory. Seems like he could have brought that up before I murdered dozens of the members of his organization, but maybe he's just a bastard. And the level ends with some tasks that you need to do really fast with really crappy controls. You have to shoot 3 speakers so the doc can't fry your brain, 2 of them are guarded by goons who will shoot and stun you, and your only weapon is a shotgun that won't reliably register hits on the speakers, but it ends with just the worst. You need to take Pickman alive, and shooting him in the legs or punching him out doesn't work for some reason. You have to kill Pickman's assistant to get a stun gun, then stun the doctor all before he can finish killing you by talking. The problem is it's damn hard to see the gun for all the vibrating, and the game really seems picky about when it'll let you pick the damn thing up. So I had to replay this last stretch about 10 times before I finally tranquilized the damn doctor.
I want you to remove the Pickman Bridge.
Think, Leo. If I take it out, what do you think will happen to you?
I'll be free.
No, you'll be dead.
At long friggin' last, some plot happens as Leo talks to the doctor about removing a device so that he can be free. But the doctor refuses because removing the device will kill Leo outright. So then Leo just kills him, after all that hell I went through to take him alive.
Dr. White, pass me the sample carrier marked Leo.
But
We agreed to use the control personality, not Leo. Leo is a killer.
Yes, I know what Leo was. Now, we've got one chance to make this work before they shut this project down.
Help me out here. Is this still supposed to be a secret twist, or what? Through a really weird and awkward edit, there's a time skip to a few weeks later as the Brain Trust here finally realizes that the doctor whose name was on Danny's files and who was talking to Danny at the start of the game might just possibly be the other person they need to talk to. This leads to 2 completely unabashed filler levels because I guess Rockstar realized the game hadn't crossed the 4-hour mark yet. First you shoot through a ton of agents in a TV studio, and then, and this is weird even for this game, you have a level out in the sticks for absolutely no reason, using an insanely overpowered silenced crossbow sniper rifle to fight a bunch of redneck hicks who constantly shout "American traitor" and "Go back to France, you communist" at you. I have no explanation for this, but between this level and some sarcastic cracks about terrorism in Leo's backstory, methinks somebody at Rockstar was really mad at the right-wing circa the war in Iraq.
Politics! This comment section's gonna suck!
The doctor ambushes Danny and tranquilizes him, and finally, Dr. White spells it out to poor Danny what the hell's been going on. Danny and Leo started out as 2 separate people, and the project used experimental tech called the Pikmin Bridge to implant Leo's consciousness into Danny's body. The idea was the 2 identities would switch control of the body completely unaware of each other, so Leo could carry out black ops and assassinations, and then transform into Danny, who'd be completely ignorant of the events and have no guilt or conscience about them. Trouble is, the tech malfunctioned almost immediately, leaving Leo as a disembodied voice in Danny's head, and because Danny was apparently one of those moron fictional scientists who test his experiments on himself, they can't fix it without him. Danny takes these revelations remarkably well, by the way. He finds out that his best friend is actually a serial killer living in his head, and he reacts like he was just told that he needs a new cell phone.
The bridge malfunctioned early on. We were working to repair the damage when you, or Leo, decided to escape.
I see.
Anyway, now Leo's trying to kill Danny and take the body over for himself, and those flashback levels we've been seeing all game are of a time that Leo actually got free, rebelling against the project and burying the Danny persona as much as he could before they were caught and institutionalized. Danny's got to get his memories back of what happened that night before he can flush Leo out, leading to one more flashback level. This one is actually kinda creepy. You play as a demented and unstoppable serial killer sneaking around a normal neighborhood, stalking civilians. It's perfect paranoia fuel. We'll just say that I got killed on purpose to stop the villain of the story. And now the final reveal that was also pretty much spelled out if you read the supplementary material that they wanted you to read. Leo killed Danny's wife. This finally convinces Danny that Leo is a bad guy, and he enters his mind palace or something for the final boss fight. This ending could have been really kick-ass if Danny showed any damn emotion during these final scenes. Danny just found out that his only friend, whom he trusted with his life, not only murdered his wife, not only turned him into a serial killer, not only put him in mortal danger for a personal vendetta, not only ruined every single facet of his life, but has been putting him through hell not just to kill him, but to steal his body, and Danny barely seems to give a shit!
It's time to get you out of my head, once and for all.
This finale should be roaring, emotionally charged. He should be gritting with determination to finally put a stop to the seemingly unstoppable Leo's schemes and killing spree and take his life back. And Danny's mindset is just, dick move killing my wife, bro. Now I am obligated to kill you. And by the way, this is the final battle. You never do actually stop the project. There's no indication by the end of the game that this vast government murder conspiracy ever gets shut down, so the storyline that dominated most of the game just cuts off with no closure. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that the game has such a weak sauce ending when, according to my research, the game was undergoing heavy rewrites almost constantly through development, with the entire split personality plot twist not even being thought up until way late in development. The game's rewrites were so bad that if you dual look up the game's lore, Leo seems to have about 3 contradictory backstories. Either someone took Joker's multiple choice origin philosophy to heart, or the writing was such a mess that nobody noticed. It would explain why most of the game is built out of disjointed padding, with the characters just spinning their wheels until a doctor comes along to flat out explain the plot. For the final battle, you run around a graveyard looking for syringes that spawn at random to execute Leo. It's supposed to be a really tense cat and mouse game until I realized you can just run away and dive into a shadow and you'll lose him because Leo has the attention span of a gnat. Then Leo makes you go through a few simple stealth encounters and one bitch of a room where about a dozen enemies with high-powered rifles are crammed on top of each other with no cover. But it's all piss easy since knocking on a wall and executing the one guy who comes over still works perfectly. At least until the wonky controls inevitably cause the execution move to fail and you lose stealth and they all swarm and kill you. To purge Leo once and for all, Danny has to accept his wife's death by burying her in his brain, and then he beats the shit out of Leo in a cutscene. For as much as this entire ending lacks emotion, this beatdown is pretty satisfying.
My name is Daniel Lamb. My name is Daniel Lamb!
My name is... I don't know my name.
Danny wakes up with his brain completely wiped to the point he doesn't even know his own name anymore, and he finds an envelope giving him a new identity and the keys to an apartment so he can start his life over. The end. Kind of. The game is supposed to have a moral choice system where if you went for a ton of pointlessly brutal executions, you get an alternate ending where Leo takes over, but the non-PC versions don't seem to keep track of your maniac score, so instead the alternate ending is just thrown in as a hidden bonus level. In Leo's ending, Danny is an idiot who just tries locking Leo in an imaginary cell, with a ton of wine bottles and hiding places, and being an idiot, one of his mind guards immediately goes into the cell with no backup to check if Leo is still in there. And the entire level is a dirt simple shooter stage where you eventually gun down Danny and kill him.
I won!
You've been out for 3 weeks now. I took the decision to remove the Pikmin Bridge.
Wait, so you mean to tell me that removing the personality implant was always an option? Why the fuck didn't you do that during the 6 years you were trying to recuperate Danny in the asylum? At any time you could have just fried Leo and gotten the science men critical to the project back, but no, you did the stupid thing! They try to justify it as they were trying to repair the bridge and salvage Leo, but the guy loudly bragged to anyone who would listen that he wouldn't rest until every last project member was dead, and you wasted 6 years trying to get him back?
Dumbass!
We're very keen to resume work on the project. Shall I gather the staff?
Yes. Just give me a moment.
You know, this story is so backwards that you could make a valid argument that the bad ending is better. It at least has the implication that the project is going to be burned down by Leo, and given how into that assassination flashback mission Danny was, and the fact he was actively and willingly working for the project, I don't think he's half the innocent bystander that the game tries to push him as. Congratulations, game! I prefer it if the bad guy wins. Manhunt 2 is not a terrible game, but it's an extremely mediocre one. Both main gameplay styles feel really badly designed, but the big problem is that, much like the main character, it has a massive identity crisis. It wants to be a gruesome, tense horror game, but most of it plays like a secret agent movie. Large chunks of it want to be an action game, but the controls are still stiff and crappy. The story is padded, meandering, and virtually directionless, with a central twist that's saved for the end but given away at the beginning. And if you stop to think about the plot for even a second, most of the characters' actions don't make any sense. It feels like nobody had a vision for what this game was supposed to be, but they kept plugging away at it anyway because the first one was a hit. And as for being the big unspeakable adults-only game, gotta say, I expected more.
Everything's gonna be alright, honey.